Yeah, I think digital nomadism is a new thing that a lot of people maybe don't know the details about how it works, but they're really intrigued by the possibility of being able to do it.
And it's got a great brand name, digital nomadism.
Yeah,
You hear that and you think, oh, I might get behind that.
exactly.
For people that aren't aware, can you break down what that term means for both of you and what it is?
Sure. Do you want to go ahead, Alex?
Sure. So digital nomads are people who choose to live and work while being mobile. So often, kind of the big idea behind digital nomadism that started the trend almost 15 years ago is this idea of geo arbitration. So if you're able to work remotely, and you can have a strong passport that can allow you to travel around the world, you can find a country with a cheaper cost of living. And by doing this, you can really maximize your income and achieve a better quality of life. So this is kind of the main idea behind digital nomadism, living somewhere where the climate is better, perhaps, cost of living is lower, working remotely, either for a company or for yourself, being a freelancer or entrepreneur, and living this way, hopping from one country to another. Or some people also live in vans and they kind of travel within their own country. Working and living in the van. Yeah.
What was the precipice 15 years ago that kind of brought about this movement? Was it just a rise in connection to the internet, countries starting to standardize that?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. And also, I guess, the biggest influencer toward this trend was Tim Ferriss with his very famous book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And he has this famous quote in there that he says, with this book, you're going to learn how to live like a millionaire without having millions in the bank. And well, the title was quite provocative, a 4-hour workweek. Basically, it just captures the idea that, we don't need to be chained to our desks and within a 9 to 5 working window. If we can leverage digital technology, if you can work remotely, if you can figure out a way to generate income, not just through a single job working for a company, then this is a way to kind of achieve the American dream, to have a good life in the modern digital era. So he kind of leveraged this idea and really promoted it, and it took off tremendously well since then. Yeah.
I would also highlight that the 15 years ago now was around when the recession was happening, if that's what we're calling it, around 2008. And I think a lot of people realized at that time that they weren't going to be able to live like their parents did, for example, and that thinking about new ways of living and working and leisuring, if that's a word, was something that was an option. They didn't have to live the 9 to 5 life, of their parents, because what did it get their parents? Not necessarily home ownership or the things that went away during that financial crisis at that time.
Would you say that people chose this lifestyle back then because it was something that was attractive to them, or it was more out of a necessity coming out of that recession, realizing that maybe the white picket fence, the big house, the kids, that wasn't necessarily achievable for them?
I think very much both, but I guess what we have been seeing in mine and Giana's work is that the second reason, the sense of uncertainty, this realization that I might never have the chances that my parents have, that I cannot really rely on having secure retirement and pension in my old age. That is something that has really kind of pushed a lot of people toward considering alternative ways of living, and digital nomadism being one of them, just because so much of our work life and social life also happens online. So it's a bit of a combination between these two things, like the rise of digital technology, how we work, how we communicate, and also this kind of sense of unease and a bit of disenchantment with the American dream and what is really possible in the future.
And if you're struggling financially and then you stumble across a book titled The 4-Hour Workweek, you're thinking, oh, I can make a bunch of money, only work 4 hours, and I'm already struggling. Let's do that. This sounds way better than where I'm at.
Yeah. And it's usually those 4 hours are usually on a beach, right? When you see all of the images that go along with digital nomadism, it's usually someone with their laptop open while they're on their sun lounger on the beach. So not only are they only working 4 hours, but then the other 4 hours, they're already in a place that's like a vacation spot, that they can do for the other half of so yeah, you can see how it's so attractive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
sipping a
reality.
mimosa on the beach sounds way better than
Yeah.
stuck in a cubicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. In reality, though, I think we do need to point out that this is kind of the romanticized view of this lifestyle. I wanted to be clear that it's actually quite difficult to live this way. You have to work a lot. You need to be very disciplined. The idea of the 4-hour work week is there. This idea of achieving a better quality of life outside of the normative structuring of life, office, home, 9 to 5, and so on and so forth. So that's still very much at the heart of it. But the daily life is not necessarily what we see on Instagram. It looks a little different.
Surprising, right? You would think everything on Instagram is real.
I know.
That was surprising to me in coming across your work. I was fairly naive around this topic. My picture of a digital nomad was that individual working from the beach, traveling, enjoying life, and presumably having enough money to get by. And I came across your work and I actually watched Nomadland, which is a great video for people that definitely recommend. Go check it out. It's really not that. And even for the people that are actively in this lifestyle, they're really just scraping by. They might be on their own terms and living life how they would like to, but you're not going to be a millionaire. And you're going to work hard and it's going to be a different kind of grind.
Yeah, that's very much the case. While I think what's important to highlight is that the digital nomad cohort, across the globe is very diverse when it comes to demographics. There are some people who are really well off and have very successful businesses, others who are basically struggling to jump from one project to another and really make ends meet. So, and then you have people who are retirees, people in their old age who really want to maximize their pension, and they're realizing that they can do so better in a place like Turkey or Greece or Portugal instead of, let's say, the US or the UK. So it's a very diverse group of people, and yeah, some of them are really scraping by, some of them are doing quite well. But what I guess unifies this cohort is this idea that something needs to be done. If there is an effort to live better, mobility, trying to be flexible, leveraging digital technology if possible, can be a path toward a little bit more comfortable or more secure, I guess, way of life. And that's something that I think comes through in the Nomadland film as well. That she is struggling, but she finds herself quite happy. I guess that is.
Yeah, we love that movie as well, and we wrote a review of it actually, which was really fun to do. We were just reflecting on that, but I think what was really nicely highlighted there, and in our data too, is the importance of community. Right? I mean, yes, they weren't rich by any means. I'm flashing back to those scenes of going to the bathroom inside the van, and
Yeah, in your little 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah, that's very far from all the Instagram images that you mentioned. But at the same time, she was happy, the main character, and because of this community that she found. And this is what we find in our work as well. Like, people oftentimes know that they are, not necessarily going to be able to save up for retirement in old age or things like this, but they feel confident that they can. Even if they only work 4 hours a day in the Tim Ferriss model, that they'll be able to pay their rent and pay their bills, and that's all they're looking for. There's often a discourse about why should I not live because I'm saving up for retirement. I should spend it now because now is when I can enjoy it. And who knows what's going to happen when I'm that old, as Nomadland, kind of accurately showed. I'm sure she didn't anticipate living like that in her old age. So who knows what's going to happen? So why not enjoy life now? That's a strong discourse in the digital nomad community.
And the film does a great job on touching for the age disparities there, where you have these young people who are just kind of disenfranchised with their view of consumerism and capitalism more broadly. And then you have these people who are kind of later in life who just maybe couldn't cut it on Social Security, had been working and maybe had fallen ill or had some health problems along the way. And now they find themselves living out of their van, just working these jobs. Amazon was a big one that kept coming up in the film, just traveling to work these jobs. And so you're going from location to location every few months, hustling, trying to get by, but you're living this lifestyle on your terms.
Yeah, indeed, and it's classic. It's the classic ethos of nomadism, right? Like moving to find a better opportunity, and that holds true for younger people who can work, and also retirees, and like the people that were represented in the film as well. So, yeah, indeed.
Are you guys noticing a breakdown in age across the board, or is it predominantly that younger group and then an older group?
So I wouldn't be able to. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to give a breakdown. I think there's some surveys out there that capture this quite accurately. In our data with the informants that we had, most of them were in their 30s and early 40s, and then let's say most of them about 70%, and we had about 30% that were older people who were retired and kind of past that classical working age. So
yeah, it was. There's a new Lonely Planet guide out, new meaning last year, I think, that's called kind of the Lonely Planet Guide to Being a Digital Nomad with Kids. And so it's acknowledging that it used to be, maybe when it first started, this phenomenon of, college kids who are straight out of college and they want to travel. And so they're doing this. And that segment is still there. But it's people who have really made a life, and they start getting married, having kids. So they're still moving from country to country. And so this new Lonely Planet guide is all about, well, how do you do that? You enroll them in one international school that has different campuses in these different countries and how to manage that. And so you can see how the lifestyle is starting to become more institutionalized through this infrastructure that's growing to cater to these different age groups.
And not just more institutionalized, but more acceptable from a society standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that we've really seen a lot in our data. This sense of, family and friends often do not really understand when someone close, to them decides to be a digital nomad. We've heard stories being shared as like, my mom keeps asking me, what is your plan? When are you going to have a plan? When are you going to settle down? So I think this is definitely a big part of this picture. And a lot of nomads are trying to legitimize in a way that way of living, trying to constantly have to prove to others that, hey, this is a perfectly legitimate way of living. This is my plan. I am being successful in my job. My kids are happy as we move, across the world. So this is a legitimate way to be. So,
how did you two come across this lifestyle? I know that you both have a marketing background. How did this fit in?
Well, so personally, I've always had a bit of a nomadic life, not to the extent that, in this classic sense, but I moved out of my home country when I was 18. I've lived all over the world, in the States, in Canada, in Finland, and the UK. So I've always kind of moved quite a bit in my life, just for education and for work. And so I came across Giana's academic work, and you have studied Nomads as well in the past, and these trends in the marketplace toward shifting away from ideals of ownership toward leveraging the sharing economy or access. And so I decided that we would be a good team to look into how this type of mindset, how these lifestyles are really taking hold in contemporary society. And so we decided to zoom into this particular phenomenon of digital nomadism. Yeah.
Have you
And
guys
to be
noticed?
really frank with you, a colleague of ours, when we were just chatting, he told me, "Have you heard of the Nomad cruise?" And as he knew kind of the ideas that we were working on, and I hadn't, and that's how it really started, by going to the Nomad cruise and really kind of diving into this particular community and studying it and writing about it.
The Nomad cruise, is that an actual like cruise ship that people are going on?
The Nomad cruise is it's an actual thing. It used to be, at least, I don't know if it still is at this very minute, but a biannual event where the organizers kind of rent a cruise boat, or at least part of it, of course, and people from all over the world, digital nomads, gather. It's an event that they really look forward to. So you have hundreds of nomads on a cruise boat. There are different routes in the spring and in the fall. And during these 4 or 5 days on the cruise, it's a joyful gathering, but it's also very strategic. There are different workshops, different lectures, if you will, on how to be a nomad. So really, there's quite a bit of an educational bent to it. People sharing advice. So it's a really kind of a dynamic gathering that brings the community together, something which is quite important for people who are on the go.
Yeah. What I found interesting about it is the workshops that Alex mentioned. Yeah, they're very practical. So, for example, how to pack. Because these are people who typically have one suitcase that has all of their belongings in it. And so there's a whole, 3-hour workshop on like, what do you do when you're in the store? What should you buy? What's going to be most practical over a variety of climates, and then demonstrations of how to actually physically pack it in. And so things that seem so sort of mundane. But one of the things that really kind of stuck out to us from the Nomad cruise was how evangelical the people on the cruise are about being a global nomad. And this was their chance to be around others who understood and to be proud, I guess, of who, and find their people. Because, if you're just in a country for, say, a couple months, yes, you develop a local community, but it goes away when they leave or when you leave. And so this cruise was an important thing to them, I think.
It was really fascinating. And the range was just so wide, from very basic practical things as to how to pack a bag, to a bit of higher order skills of how to generate passive income, how to navigate, how to live this way, to much more philosophical and ideological discourse, if you will, about what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to feel in charge, to have agency, and to feel in charge of your life path? So there are all of these discussions, and it was really quite fascinating.
Is that where most of them, that idea of freedom, is that what kind of draws most people in? Is the idea that they're getting away from, I don't know how you would phrase it, the modern life that most people are living, just being, again, touching back to the film, the idea that they're kind of controlled by the dollar and you're escaping that to some extent.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely feel when you talk to nomads who are at the digital nomads who are at the beginning of their journey, they feel like this is an escape from capitalism. And that, yes, they need some money in order to live, but they don't have to live by these structures where you're sitting in a desk chair, And of course, pre-COVID, it was weirder, I guess, to not, sit at a desk chair every day than it is now. But this was definitely what motivates them at the beginning. But as Alex alluded to earlier, what they soon find out that is, in order to make this lifestyle work financially, there's a lot of hustle that needs to go on. So you're not abandoning the act of work, you're just doing the work differently.
Would you say that it's harder to maintain this lifestyle than a quote unquote traditional lifestyle, working a 9 to 5?
Yes and no. I mean, I think if you ask digital nomads, they would answer that it's for them a normal, a traditional lifestyle seems harder. And I think that's an important point, actually, because a lot of what drives these people to really embrace this way of living is this pursuit toward feeling a little bit more stable and secure, to have a little bit more agency. And this really came to light, especially during COVID, when so many people who had mortgages and good rentals in big cities and your stable job, 9 to 5, all of a sudden found themselves without work overnight as everything shifted so drastically, and they couldn't afford to pay the rent anymore. There were quite a few people who started to look for a different way of living that would allow them to feel a little bit more secure. So for regular folk, like us, it may seem like having 3 to 4 different hustles, working freelance is very difficult and difficult to maintain. It's quite precarious way to be. But for a digital nomad, they would answer, well, if I lose one of these jobs, I have 3 other or 5 other jobs to fall back onto. So I'm not just relying on this one employment, which I can lose overnight. So to answer, is it more difficult or not? It depends who you're asking. But I guess this pursuit of feeling a little bit more stable is what drives a lot of these people to go to that life.
And like you said, they might say it's harder working that 9 to 5 and living that lifestyle than the one they're currently in.
Yeah, they would say I would much rather get up at 2 a.m. for a client call on the other end of the world than, go 9 to 5 to work every day, but then worry if I can, if I will continue to have the job tomorrow, if I'll have enough pension when I retire. So this kind of sense of having agency, hustling a lot, but also maybe building a future that is a bit more sustainable from their point of view.
Yeah, I think it's to perhaps to the average, the normal, or I'm trying to think of what word I should use. The average person, it seems like it's a less stable life, right? But they interpret it as the opposite. That, well, because the 9 to 5, how many layoffs has Google has had recently? And, even the hugest, most successful companies, you don't necessarily as an employee feel safe there anymore. And so this idea that Alex just articulated that, well, but if I have 5 of these sort of uncertain jobs, yes, a couple of them will probably go away, but there'll still be a few others, versus if I work for Google and they do massive layoffs, there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm out in the cold. So a lot of digital nomads tell us they actually feel more secure and stable than if they had a 401k or owned their own home or these other sort of traditional indicators of stability in life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are realizing that the stability they perceived in their life really isn't there, especially with these mass layoffs. You're realizing, oh, they can just take your job away tomorrow. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and in that sense, within a traditional lifestyle, you have a mortgage or a rental contract, you have a car, all of these things come with financial responsibilities, burdens, but not just financially, but also in time. You're bound to a certain contract that you need to be paying off this item for the next, 10, 15 years, which, for a lot of our digital nomads that we've spoken with, this feels like these anchors that are really like these chains that are keeping them in place, that make them feel quite vulnerable if something were to happen, and some of the people we've been talking to, they bring up different events, from election results to pandemics, to even climate change and how unpredictable that is. So there are different factors that contribute toward people feeling like these regular markers of a stable lifestyle are actually experienced as burden, as these chains and anchors that one needs to liberate oneself from.
What are you guys taking away from the rise of societies like this? What does it say about the world more broadly, that people are feeling disenfranchised and the need to kind of check out in this way?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think they necessarily see it as checking out, because, like I said, there's a lot of hustle involved in it, and but I think they see it again as reducing risk. So there's these new visas that a lot of digital nomads that are lobbying for. to the UN called digital nomad visas. And the idea is that, your international identification doesn't necessarily need to be tied to a specific country. And I think a lot of people find that very attractive because where they can go and how long they can stay is so determined by their country of origin. And so I think that's one thing, for example, that they really gravitate towards.
Yeah, and to your question about what does this indicate about broader shifts in society, I think that the fact that this lifestyle is becoming so popular, it kind of indicates that there is this general sense of uneasiness with disillusionment with what we can expect from the future, and we see proof of that daily on the news and in general. And so, what it also speaks toward is kind of this, what we see in society more broadly is this shift away from, I guess, again, valuing ownership as an aspiration in life. We've seen the rise of the subscription economy, everything from Netflix to Spotify to subscribing to a car, instead of buying more or getting a lease. This shift toward this access-based economy is something that we've been seeing for quite a while, and I feel like this is something that will continue for sure because it affords a little bit more flexibility that I think people feel like they need. So in the digital nomad group, we see kind of an extreme case of how you can really live this flexible life, but we definitely see this trickling through in more kind of normative lifestyles. Yeah, as well.
It's fascinating watching the economy adopt some of those stances, especially like you said around ownership versus just renting what you need when you need it. And I think the big ones that come to mind are renting a car rather than owning a car. Or you have these communities pop up where they have bike sharing or little community pantries. Do you think that is emerging out of market necessity, or is that taking cues from people living this lifestyle and kind of embracing being nomads?
Go ahead. I think it's coming out of the market understanding that people value flexibility, that incomes are uncertain or lower, that people who don't have a lot of space. So we see places like there's a platform here in the UK called Library of Things, where you can go and rent anything from a picnic basket to a drill or a vacuum cleaner. And these types of businesses, which are reflective of the broader economy, really understand that people don't have space storage because they can afford smaller homes, or they don't necessarily want to spend money on these types of items. We see this in places in New York. A lot of rental buildings would have something called like a common goods room in the basement, where you can go and rent a set of, a dining set. So when you have guests over for dinner, you can just go and borrow these items and you don't need to purchase them or store them. And all of this is reflective of this sense that we don't actually need to own a lot to physically have ownership of it to live our lives. That can be done through different mechanisms in the market.
Yeah, and that it's actually more convenient and can bring more benefits. So, for example, last year, Japan Airlines started a partnership with one of the clothes sharing platforms. So you may know Rent the Runway in the US, for example. And so with the partnership with Japan Airlines, so you're flying to Japan, and instead of packing your bag with all of the clothing that you'll need for the temperature there or whatever, you can order the clothes that you want through the platform, and then they'll be waiting for you when you arrive. So it results in less carbon footprint from flying because it's less weight on the plane, and you don't have to schlep your bag to the airport, right? So there's all these, it's not just it's not just about accessing all these benefits that come from accessing rather than owning, and then buying, start to become really apparent in all these different domains.
Which that sounds great. Not having to check a bag and worry about baggage claim sounds fantastic. But I also do worry about the trend more broadly, especially around ownership. And maybe that's just my naivety. Maybe it's just me being youthful. But the idea that we can't own a house. So these are the avenues that we have to take. Do you think that these trends are born out of that, the idea that people just can't afford these things anymore, so we have to come up with innovative ways to still gain them or have utility for them when we're able?
Yes, I think there's this notion of precarity, right? There is more economic precarity, and I think people assume that that economic precarity is going to be there. And so figuring out, yeah, how to manage that is definitely at the heart of this. Yeah, it's one of the, oftentimes trends like digital nomadism can become romanticized. And that was what we loved about the Nomadland movie is they didn't romanticize it. It's not just the Instagram pictures of someone on the beach with their laptop. It's people living this kind of lifestyle, because that's their way to manage the precarity that they just, is a normal part of their life.
And managing this precarity mobilizes so many of the practices and the actions that a lot of digital nomads need to make in order to live this way. So it's not. I really. It's important to kind of highlight that it's not just about picking a cool little town in a place with good weather and finding a nice Airbnb with a pool and that looks glamorous. And of course, you're not going to be able to have this in a city like London, but you can live like this glamorous life in a place like Bali. In reality, it's much more complex than that. It's like there are all of these platforms for house sitting and pet sitting. So people are trying to minimize their costs, not just spending a bunch of money on an Airbnb in a warm country, but really kind of strategically and intentionally thinking about their accommodation and stringing different options. Okay, in this place I'm going to be house sitting for like 3 months, helping with maintenance of the place, cleaning, watering the plants. And this other place I'm going to like be pet sitting for a few months. This is against the backdrop of feeling quite precarious and experiencing economic precarity. There are a lot of WhatsApp groups, for instance, different type of social media groups on Facebook or on WhatsApp, where, for instance, when I was doing data collection in Greece, in Kenya, I remember like landing at the airport. I turned on my mobile data on, and I joined the local digital nomad group on WhatsApp. And just these messages started flooding with posts about jobs, accommodation, if somebody needs a place to stay, or questions, do you guys know of any work? So there are these kind of micro communities in different locations around the world that are there to support people, digital nomads. And again, this helps toward mitigating the sense of feeling unrooted, feeling scared. Am I going to have a project or a job next month? Where am I going to stay? So there are kind of these infrastructures in place that contribute toward feeling a little bit more secure and supported through the community and through these platforms and different options.
Do you guys look at it as a failure in some sense of society that people aren't financially secure enough to live maybe a traditional lifestyle? Or do you not view it in that lens?
That's a great question. I'm not sure what your answer is going to be, Alex, but I don't really view it in that way. And I think it's because I'm quite influenced by the digital nomads that we got to know throughout, the length of our project. They really see it as something that is liberating. And whether they're fooling themselves, deluding themselves for whatever reason, I don't know, but they experience it as something that is liberating. Like, oh, I never thought I'd be able to travel and see these other countries. And isn't this amazing? And I would rather work freelance anyway. I don't feel like I'm missing out. And some of them have stories and narratives that really touch your heart. Like I'm thinking about that gentleman after 9/11. Did you want to tell that?
I mean, I remember speaking with someone, and he was saying how he really imagined that he's going to have this perfect life. His family was very insistent on him getting a good education, which he did. He studied in New York. He got his dream job at 23 years old. And then 9/11 happened. And so he lost his job basically overnight because he had Middle Eastern background as well, which didn't really help at that time. And I remember the quote precisely. He said, "I never wanted to feel this insecure again in my life." So he decided to do something radical. But you asked if it's a failure. I think a lot of them feel a bit that way, like that society has failed them, that traditional institutions of the state, etc., are not there really to support and to look out for the average person. And I think that fuels a little bit this urge to take matters in one's own hands if they can, and find that good life through different means, because it's clear that if you are 40-year-old like average millennial living in a place like New York or London, chances are that you're not going to be able to afford your own home, and hence what are the prospects if one continues this way. So living this way, maybe this is not to say that none of these people aspire toward these kind of traditional ideals. That's not the case at all. Many wish that they could afford a home and kind of be more grounded, perhaps, but it's just not possible. And when it's not possible, then what is the next best thing? And sometimes living this way, if you're house sitting or pet sitting for a long period of time, if you're living in a country with a cheaper cost of living, perhaps you can save a little money. Perhaps that can give you a bit of a cushion, something to then work with if you decide that you want to kind of be a bit more grounded. Again, relying on one's own efforts rather than on an employer or on the state to enable that.
So in your guys' understanding of it, would you say that people living this lifestyle, it's not necessarily that they feel it was thrust upon them, it's more so that they actively chose it?
I think they actively chose
Yes.
it. A lot of them might have felt that they have no other choice, but it was still a choice. It's a purposefully chosen way to live.
Yeah, because you could say, well, okay, I'm gonna live in a rented place, so I'll accept the fact I can't afford to buy, but then you probably have to live with roommates for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I could take they know that there's, permanent jobs at, say, a McDonald's or somewhere that are probably available to them, that they could do, but they don't see the possibility to sort of enjoy life or even to be able to save up to enjoy life later. And so I think in comparison to that, they do feel like that, that they made the right choice. Because like I said, even in nomad land, which there's so many aspects of the way they live, which are so bleak, they have that community and each other. And a lot of them feel like from maybe the small town that they grew up in or whatever, that they don't have those opportunities unless they, are mobile like that. So they could stay in their hometown, and they know that, but they also know what their life would look like if they did that, and they're underlying it from somewhere is a sense of adventure, I guess you could say, in terms of how they want to meet this precarious challenge that is in front of them.
And it holds true for professionals across the board. Here all around us in London, we have highly educated professionals working good jobs that are objectively well paid, but cost of living in the city makes having a relatively good quality of life quite challenging. So it doesn't necessarily need to be that your option is working at McDonald's. It could be like staying on this seemingly great job in a fabulous city, but still struggling to make ends meet. So then, to me now, having studied this community for so long, it sounds really logical that why not I take my skills and hopefully if I can negotiate remote work with my employer, I can take that salary and try to kind of get a little bit of a breathing room from this kind of wheel that we're trapped in here in big cities and kind of more traditional lifestyles.
Especially if you're projecting forward, right? It seems like that disparity is only going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Which isn't comforting, right? It's kind of a bleak thought.
Yeah, I think Giana alluded to that earlier. A lot of these digital nomads, and I think could be said for people from this generation, like millennials in particular, perhaps Gen Zs as well. I'm not sure, but there's a temporal reorientation toward the present. We no longer, it's not very comfortable to think about the future and what it might bring, which kind of propels this focus on the present. Okay, what can I do today, this week, or this year? How can I live a better life now? Because it's really not quite certain what's going to happen 2 years from now. We had people from our informants from digital nomads who were like, quote unquote, something like, yeah, I know it sounds crazy that I'm not saving for retirement, but honestly, I can't even be bothered thinking about this. Like, I'm not even sure if I'm going to make it that far. So might as well I make sure that I'm comfortable now, this year, the next 5 years, and then whatever happens when I'm 70, I'm going to figure it out when I'm 70. So this is a very kind of acute focus on the present rather than the future, which is quite typical for this moment in time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, this always raises the question when we present this or write about this or anything. Well, what is going to happen from a societal perspective when all of these people turn 75 or however old? What is it? And they don't have, their retirement funds or their savings or anything like that. What is that going to look like? And, is it going to be a bunch of roving communities like we saw in Nomad land? What is the government's role going to be in all this with all these older people with no resources, to necessarily support themselves? And, working a job in Amazon is probably going to be part of what people's retirement plans are.
Well, and what happens now that we have the emergence of AI? And as robotics continue to improve, are people even going to have access to those jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked about it today, because, as we mentioned at the beginning, you have entrepreneurs, you have freelancers, people doing all kinds of jobs remotely, being a digital nomad. But a lot of them are freelancers, copywriters, project managers, and those are the kinds of jobs that seem to be quite threatened by the advent of AI. So it's not like I have an answer actually, but it is an interesting question as to what's going to happen with these jobs and what would digital nomads then do if if so much of this kind of remote type work can be outsourced to AI, then what is going to be the next shift? Yeah. Something interesting to consider.
I would just add to that I have yet to see output by AI on almost any function that is at the level of a human. So to me, it's a little bit of scaremongering. Think about when every new technology has come in, and people, we're all going to be out of jobs forever, and that never seems to happen. So I'm not as concerned about it maybe as others are.
I'm a little concerned about it. I fall into maybe the fear-mongered camp. Maybe I'm just getting hit with too much propaganda, but I do worry about what society looks like in 5 years or 10 years, especially for these impacted communities. Like you said, people who are maybe hitting retirement age but can't survive off their social security checks. And so we're going to be looking for work and already are kind of behind the 8 ball because maybe employers don't want someone who's in their late 70s working for them. They'd rather get that fresh out of high school kid. And so then now they're competing against that demographic as well as AI.
I agree with you, and I don't have answers as to what necessarily will happen, but it is something that is concerning, and I guess AI is not as good as a human is, but it will become. So I guess whenever we can bring the humanness, I guess, to task execution, that would be a value. And we talk about it in a business school context, as many brands now outsource ads and taglines or whatever it may be to AI. So what is a business student to do, whether they want to be a digital nomad or not? So you need to be able to do it better, I guess, than that.
Do you notice that more people are finding this lifestyle as a result of AI coming on the scene? They're maybe more inclined to go down this path? Or we're not quite there yet?
No, I would say we're not quite there yet. We haven't, even, monitoring like the different chat groups and different groups that Alex mentioned where digital nomads tend to congregate. Um, yeah, they do. There doesn't seem to be much conversation about, oh, things are getting even worse. How are we going to switch up what we do? There doesn't seem to be much
Yeah, I
concern
mean,
yet.
they talk about it a lot, which makes sense. But these are also people who are quite comfortable with technology. A lot of them work in tech with digital, immersed within the digital infrastructure and all sorts of platforms. So I think at this point it's still a very fascinating topic. Something like, hey, what can we do with this? How can we leverage it? Again, not like looking at it something that is necessarily scary, but how can actually this can be used toward our advantage, toward my advantage as an individual in my work or whatever it may be as a digital nomad, how I can do my work more efficiently or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What about for the COVID pandemic? Obviously, you had a lot more people working just remote in general, but in regards to this lifestyle, was there an influx of people?
Oh, that's when it exploded. Digital nomadism has been around for what, 15? Yeah, as we were discussing, around 15 years. But though it only came into public consciousness and the numbers of people doing it exploded during COVID, because all of a sudden there was a whole group of people who realized, oh, I don't have to be sitting in a physical place anymore in order to do my job. And I think that's really at the heart of why there's so much resistance to this back to the office movement. And so I think, there were a lot of people who maybe gave up their home, bought houses in in another country or, all sorts of things. And then just said, look, I can do my job just as well. There's been no downturn in my productivity. So, and they've really been able to resist these back to work, calls and live the remote nomad lifestyle. There's been a huge explosion in numbers.
And those who are facing pushback from employers are basically willing to quit. They're not willing to put up with this once they've seen how life can be.
That's really when it came on my purview, was during COVID. And you started seeing people embrace this lifestyle and share it with others. And I was kind of surprised. I thought during COVID specifically, I thought that this would just be the new generation, that most of these jobs would start to take a remote format, but now they're clawing a lot of those back and trying to get people back in the office.
Yeah, it is. It's surprising to see this return, so I wonder, it's interesting to consider, to think about why this is happening. Are employers getting nervous? I mean, there are many reasons why, of course, and theories, but no one seems really enthusiastic from the employees' side to get back to the office. So it's interesting how this is going to unfold. In my personal view, the companies that see the value in flexibility will be the ones that will be able to retain the best employees and the best kind of workforce, to put it this way.
Yeah. I think the digital nomad community sees this as you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Yeah. And that's why I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of activity around digital nomad visas, for example, that they're lobbying the UN in order to get them, and passports, and that, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. There is a whole group of people that spans multiple generations that want to be able to work in this way. And it's, kind of incumbent on the different societal institutions to facilitate this, that it's impossible to go back no matter how much companies may want to.
Are you guys noticing a lot of governments embrace this, like you said, with the visas and these specific programs they have designed for the digital nomads?
Definitely.
Yes.
There are quite a few countries on the list now. Estonia was one of the kind of pioneers in the EU with their digital e-visa, specifically targeting digital nomads. Places like Greece, Croatia, Portugal. There are just many places in Mexico.
Mexico introduced one during COVID.
Yes, around the world, and just not just in Europe. So governments are seeing the value of these workers being in their countries. Some even give monetary incentives, like here is 5K for you to come and be a digital nomad in my country. And the reason for that is because these, a lot of these nomads, if we refer to them as workers, they can have, they stimulate the local economy, of course, support local businesses by being in these places, and so on and so forth. Of course, there's the flip side of this. There's the argument that they're perhaps affecting the rental markets negatively, taking over areas, in places like Bali. Everything is a co-working space, basically. But there is obviously always the other side of everything. The nomads that we've spoken with are conscious, I guess, of these impacts, and many have spoken about initiatives that they take upon in local communities, working with local communities in different ways to support them. So there is this genuine desire to do good in these countries where they visit, and I think governments are appreciating this.
Is it predominantly people from Western countries, or more specifically wealthier countries, moving to these maybe less well-off countries to do this work?
Yes, the short answer is yes. It's basically the people who can do this are people with strong passports. And the people with strong passports are, and the resources to do this are the middle class from Europe, North America, Australia, so sort of the Western world. It's starting to change. I think you see more people from developing countries, in particular in Europe, maybe Eastern European countries. It's starting to become more popular.
I think as the lifestyle gets more popular, it becomes more accessible, of course, as different countries and governments around the world start to offer digital nomad visas, really putting it in on paper, basically. What does this mean? What is required? What is the level of income one needs to have in order to be able to get that visa? It becomes much more clearer how, for people who want to live this way, how to do it. So we see now people from Southeast Asia also embracing that lifestyle and moving to countries in Europe, kind of like the opposite flow of migration here to be digital nomads. So it's becoming more accessible and more popular for many.
I could definitely see there being that slight realm of contention where you do have these people from better countries going to less well-off areas, affecting the markets, affecting the economy, maybe in a negative manner for those who are living there and can't necessarily do this in reverse.
Yeah, in fact, countries like Portugal, which was especially for Americans, an early digital nomad location that offered digital nomad visas, they actually have stopped offering digital nomad visas because it was so popular. They were inundated with Americans specifically, and the locals couldn't find housing. And so they stopped the whole visa program. So I think we might see more and more countries doing the same, like Barcelona, for example. The city laws now say that Airbnb is not allowed to be there because that was taking up, too much housing from locals as well. So I think governments are, they're starting to facilitate it more with the visas, but then based on accommodation situations, this can fluctuate.
I think broadly, the more structure there is and frameworks and rules to be followed, the easier it's going to be to contain the impact, I guess, and manage it. And I think that's one of the arguments behind these digital nomad visas. If it's like free for all, of course, it's difficult to mitigate negative impacts. If there's structure and control over the flow, it's going to be possible.
And it's almost funny in a weird way. If it is free for all, you're almost exporting the problem that you're trying to escape from, right? If you're living in New York or in Sydney and you can't survive there, so you're taking your work but moving to one of these other countries, now you're kind of pricing that out for those people and creating that same environment for them.
Correct. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm sure they don't necessarily appreciate that, but if you can afford to do it, then that makes sense for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think as political situations shift in different countries, this shifts as well. So some people want to move from their country because a particular person is in power, but don't want to move to a particular country because a particular person's in power. So So the desirability shifts. Yeah.
What would you both say to someone who is looking at this lifestyle and seriously considering it for them?
Well, I think the first thing is know what you're getting into. So it's like we said before, there's a lot of kind of labor that goes into this that most people don't factor in. I remember being at a co-working space in Bali and being out to dinner with my colleague one night at the co-working space where everyone was living and staying. But it was late. It was probably like 10 p.m. and we were sitting there eating and chatting. But she was sitting right next to us and had her laptop open and this huge, Excel spreadsheet with all these different, formulas, and she's inputting data. And we were like, oh, what are you doing? Meanwhile, we're having a glass of wine and enjoying a meal. And she just said, oh, this is the only time I get to bill my clients. So I spend every meal, my evening meals, like doing my accounting work. And it was just like, whoa. So a meal, especially the evening meal, which is typically social or at least relaxing, even if it's not with anyone else, a time to relax, is like her time to do this kind of main task that she has to do. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that the reality of being a digital nomad, whether it's because your clients are in a different time zone or whatever it is, does not leave you with this lifestyle that is idyllic, and that the way they see it on Instagram, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well. I would say that it can be a wonderful way to live, to really kind of regain a bit of sense of agency, of freedom, to experience new things, to be in control of your own time, if the work, of course, allows it. But it's also really, really challenging, and it's not just a matter of sitting with a laptop on a beach, which almost no real digital nomad that I know does, just because it's not practical. So it requires quite a bit of sacrifice, but it's just an alternative way to be in the modern day and age. And for some people it fits really well. It's definitely not a way to get rich quick, as many on YouTube, it's full of these kinds of videos of how you can really make it as a digital nomad in 2 months and a half. That doesn't really happen for most people. So it's a challenging way to be, challenging in a different way than normative life in a big city. So the challenges are different, but there are benefits to both, I guess. And for those who really feel the urge to feel that freedom, to take matters in one's own hands, if they feel disenchanted with normative life, this might be a good way to break from the pattern.
Do you think that the perception of this lifestyle is coming back to more of a baseline as you have more people who are doing it and documenting it? Or is social media, as it does, just taking the highlights and amplifying those to everyone?
I think social media is still doing that, but there are other sources of information now. So, for example, there was an article in The Guardian just today, which was about digital nomads, because digital nomads have been around for like 15 years, as we were discussing. There are some who have been doing this for, say, 10 years. And the article today featured 3 digital nomads who had decided after about 10 years to give it up and to move back to the country they were originally from. Their parents were getting older and they became disillusioned with it. Basically, they were like, I don't regret doing it and I enjoyed it, but this is not something that I realize this is not the way I want to live the rest of my life. So I think that we'll start to see discourses like that more and more appearing in the media, whether it's social media or not, that do make people a little bit more sobering and make people aware of the reality of this, in comparison to the early days, which was all, sipping a beer, in an Instagram post, a Corona on the beach or something.
I think it's sobering or realistic, because when something gets glamorized, everything gets pushed to the extreme, is now everybody's going to be living this way. No, so the reality is that for many people, this is a good way to live for a number of years. Maybe it allows them to save a little bit of money, as I said, by living in cheaper countries and saving. And then perhaps they might want to go back. So maybe this span of, 5 to 10 years would feel really enlightening and quite liberatory, and that in and of itself has a positive impact on life. And as we don't know what's going to happen in the future, you never know,
Yeah.
which life path would actually be the most sustainable one. So I think what we see now is a bit more realistic take on this lifestyle and on the people who undertake it.
Is that a pretty common occurrence that people will do a stint of a few years and then revert back? Or is that more rare?
I think the people who don't really have a choice, who are doing it because that's all they can afford. So again, thinking back to the film Nomadland or something like this, they will probably be doing it, for the rest of their lives. A lot of the people in that film were not actors, by the way. Frances McDormand is obviously an actor, but most of the others were people who lived in that community that she interacted with, during the course of that film. So I think there's some that, even if they wanted to escape it or make the decision to move back to London or wherever, they can't. But I think for those who do have a choice, like the ones where you're starting to see these narratives appear in the media, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to do it for a particular period of time in your life when you might need to financially, or you might want to because you have a curiosity about the world, but you can't afford to just travel without the income of something. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to only, to not say, okay, it's my decision now to give up regular life and never come back to it. I think that, life fluctuates, and this is a new option that could be for a part of someone's life, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't think I've spoken with anyone who said, like, this is it and I never want to live a different way. What I do hear is I never want to feel that vulnerable again. I really always want to have this kind of things in my own hands, the stability from different incomes, or be really smart about the jobs that I take. People don't want to rely on someone else just because they've learned that they cannot. Someone else being an employer, the government, or whatever it may be. But I've never heard anybody say, like, I can't imagine ever settling, even for a few years somewhere. So again, in reality, a lot of nomads have a measure to take on this. It works for now, so if it works for now, I'm gonna keep on doing it, and if not, I'll have to figure something else out. But for the moment, this feels good and has certain perks. So, yeah.
And I think, again, it plays back to the want to versus need to and the duality of that. You can really accept and kind of idolize the lifestyle if it's something you're choosing because you want to do it. It's not forced upon you. You're not financially strapped, and this is just something you're embracing. It's for the people that have to, that are they have no other option, so they're going to make this choice. That's when it kind of pulls on your heartstrings a little bit, and you realize, oh, okay, what's happening here from a society standpoint? How are we letting people slip through these cracks where they feel this is their only option, not an option that they're actively choosing?
Yes, and I think when we say they have to, some of them really cannot. Some nomads that I've spoken with really could not afford to pay rent, so they had to do it. Others can continue in the regular way. They can continue kind of paying rent and working the job, but it's not necessarily comfortable and it goes nowhere. So it lacks prospects. So in that sense, it's the have to comes from is mobilized by this urge for life to be more than just paying that bill and spending every paycheck to the very last cent every month with no prospects of where this is going to go.
And I think that plays into why it's attractive, is you have people that see that and realize, I don't want to do this for the next 40 or 50 years. I don't want to be on this rat race. And especially when you hear these stories of people who are in it and live and work until they can retire and then die a day after they retire. It's like, what was it all for? You spent your whole life grinding and you didn't even get to enjoy the fruit from that grind.
We have a quote in one of our papers that said this literally to the word. Someone was saying like, "I'm doing this next week. I'm going." Like I had a colleague who literally died the day after they retired. So it's just it puts it in stark, sharp relief just how disillusioned people are with what is ahead. So people don't want to wait. And they don't want to work for the rest of their lives, and then you never know. Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that you have tomorrow. So do what you would like to do today.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Alex, Giana, thank you both for taking the time out of your night to join me.
You're welcome. It was very nice talking with you.
It was our pleasure, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes.
I did as well. Do you guys want to plug any of your stuff, any of your articles, your papers, where people can find you?
Sure. There's an article in Harvard Business Review. I think that's where you might have found us, Nick. Do you remember what that's called?
No.
Sorry, we're not good marketers of ourselves, I think. But I think if you look up Harvard Business Review, Digital Nomads, Alex and Giana, you'll get there. But that's probably the most accessible summary of the work we've done in this space. I mentioned that we wrote a review of Nomadland, the movie that you mentioned.
That is also available as open access, actually, and we discuss, these consumers living on the periphery of society and the market. So this might be of interest to some in your audience.
Yeah, that's in a journal called Globalization, Markets and Culture. And we're happy to share any links with your listeners if that would be helpful.